Hello and welcome to my channel for a true story about a case that shook Brazil and the world in 2003. The heartbreaking case of Lyanna and Felipe Beajo.
In 2003, a story shook all of Brazil and soon the rest of the world. It was everywhere, on TV, in newspapers, online. A young couple had gone missing in the forests of Embu Guasu province, and hundreds of people, police officers, rescue teams, and volunteers joined forces to search for them. Everyone hoped they'd be found alive. But as the days passed, that hope began to fade. And what investigators eventually uncovered was far worse than anyone could have imagined. The final days of these two young people turned into a living nightmare. And for their families, grieving, desperate for justice, the nightmare didn't end there. Because when the main suspect was finally caught, a rapist, a torturer, a brutal killer, something unbelievable happened. He wasn't punished the way the world expected. In fact, his life actually got better after the crime. So who were Lyanna Friedenbach and Felipe Cafe? Lyanna Bay Friedenbach was born in Sao Paulo in May of 1987. She was the eldest of two children in a well-known, comfortable family. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, was a respected lawyer, successful, admired, and devoted to his family. Felipe Silva Cafe, on the other hand, also grew up in Sao Paulo, born in July of 1984. But his life looked very different. He came from a large, modest family and learned early on what it meant to work hard. From a young age, he took part-time jobs to help support himself and his loved ones. Lyanna and Felipe met in school. At first, it was just friendship, the kind that makes you laugh at everything and talk for hours. But over time, it grew into something deeper, their first real love. There was just one problem. Lyanna's parents were strict and deeply religious. They raised her with discipline, Sunday school, and church every week. Romantic relationships at her age were strictly off-limits. And then there was the issue of class. Lyanna's family was wealthy, while Felipe's was not. To them, it was a relationship that simply couldn't happen. But that didn't stop the two from seeing each other. Instead, they kept their love secret, sneaking away for quiet moments together, finding little corners of the city where no one would see them. Every meeting was risky, but they didn't care. They were young, in love, and believed they could make it work. Neither of them knew that their last trip together would change everything. In the fall of 2003,
Lyanna and Felipe decided they needed a break from everything, from school, from rules, from the constant pressure of hiding their relationship. They wanted time alone, just the two of them. So they planned a little escape, a camping trip to a quiet, secluded area outside the city. It was supposed to be an adventure, something simple, innocent, and exciting. They prepared carefully. Felipe even came up with a believable alibi to make sure no one would worry. He told his parents he was heading out on a camping trip with some friends. Lyanna, on the other hand, told her parents she was going on a sightseeing trip with a group from church, an excuse she knew would instantly put their minds at ease. Their families believed them. No one questioned their stories. No one could have imagined that by letting them go, they were unknowingly sending their children to their deaths. For Lyanna and Felipe, it was pure happiness. They were finally free. No judgment, no sneaking around, no curfews, just a week together, surrounded by nature, away from everything and everyone. They chose a quiet, picturesque area called Embu Guasu, a stretch of forest just outside Sao Paulo. They packed light, a tent, sleeping bags, a few personal items, and some food for the trip. Money was tight, though. They were students after all, but since they were entitled to free public transportation, they planned out their route carefully. Every bus, every stop, all mapped out. On the morning of October 31st, they met at their agreed spot, careful not to be seen together by anyone who might recognize them. They caught the first bus out of town, heading toward their secret destination. By the time they reached another city later that night, they were exhausted. So they decided to rest at the bus station, just a quick sleep before continuing their journey. The next morning, they boarded two more buses, and by the afternoon, they were finally close. From there, they walked several kilometers through the trees until they found it, a quiet, hidden clearing deep in the woods, the perfect place to camp. The day was warm, the sun was shining, and despite the long trip, their spirits were high. They laughed, they joked, and talked about everything they wanted to do during their little getaway. For them, it was the beginning of a new memory, a small, beautiful escape from the world. Neither of them knew it would be their last. When they finally reached the spot marked on their map, Lyanna and Felipe began setting up their small but cozy campsite. They were excited,
laughing as they unpacked their bags and pitched their tent, completely unaware that they weren't alone. What the couple didn't realize was that this remote area wasn't as peaceful as it looked. Poverty was widespread here, and where poverty thrives, so does crime. The sight of two well-dressed young people wandering through the woods with large backpacks didn't go unnoticed. Nearby, by a small pond, two men were fishing. Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, known locally as Pernambuco, and Roberto Alves Cardardo, who went by Champina. Despite being only 16 years old, Champina was already the leader of a small gang. The moment they spotted Lyanna and Felipe walking through the trees, they took interest. A young, well-off-looking couple. Easy targets, they thought. At first, they figured they could rob them, but as they watched longer from the bushes, their thoughts turned darker. They followed quietly, keeping to the shadows, until the couple reached an old abandoned farm, the spot where they planned to stay. Lyanna and Felipe, unaware of the danger lurking nearby, settled in, ate a quick meal, and began tidying up their campsite. Once the two criminals were sure the couple was alone and unarmed, they made their move. They burst out from their hiding place, threatening them with weapons. Lyanna and Felipe froze, too terrified to fight back or even run. The attackers tore through their belongings, searching for valuables, but found nothing of real worth. That's when their plan shifted. If there wasn't money in their bags, maybe there was money waiting at home. The young criminals decided to hold them for ransom. Terrified, Lyanna blurted out that she came from a wealthy family and that her father would pay anything to get her back. Hearing that, the men's eyes lit up. But they had no real plan, no experience with kidnappings, no idea how to demand ransom without getting caught. Still, greed and cruelty drove them forward. As they sat in the dark, trying to figure out their next move, Lyanna and Felipe's dream trip, their private little escape, had already turned into a nightmare. The gang decided they needed to hide their captives, make sure there was no way they could escape. At first,
They took Lyanna and Felipe to a crumbling abandoned structure near the old farm where the couple had been camping, but the place had no windows, no doors, and wasn't secure enough to hold anyone. So they came up with a new plan to move them to the home of one of the gang members. Once there, things got even worse. Felipe was tied up and brutally beaten, left barely conscious, unable to defend himself or protect Lyanna. That same night, the horror escalated. One by one, the gang members took turns assaulting the helpless young girl. It was a night of unimaginable cruelty, one that broke her completely. By morning, the criminals still hadn't figured out how to collect ransom. They didn't know who to call or how to demand money without being caught. So instead, they decided on something far darker. They would kill their captives and bury the evidence deep in the forest. The next day, after hours of torment, the half-conscious Felipe was dragged into the woods. Pernambuco, one of the attackers, led him deep among the trees. Moments later, a single gunshot echoed through the forest, and when Pernambuco returned, he was alone. Lyanna instantly knew what had happened. She could feel it. Felipe was gone. Still, her captors lied to her, claiming they had let him go, but deep down, she knew the truth. From that point on, the men had no intention of letting her live. They decided to keep her for themselves, to use her as a prisoner until they eventually grew bored. Meanwhile, back home, her parents were beginning to worry. A couple of days after Lyanna's supposed church trip, they learned there had been no excursion at all, and none of her friends knew where she was. Panic set in. The Friedenbach family quickly contacted Felipe's parents, hoping he might know something, but his family believed he was away camping with friends, just as he'd told them. No one realized that both Lyanna and Felipe had vanished without a trace, their phones turned off, their trail cold. And by then, deep in the forest, the nightmare was only getting worse.
Thanks to his influence and connections, Lyanna's father, Henry Friedenbach, was able to mobilize nearly every available police officer in Sao Paulo, step by step.
Investigators began piecing together what had happened, retracing the couple's movements from the moment they disappeared. Through careful detective work, they eventually tracked their path to the remote forests of Embu Guasu, the same place where their phones had last pinged before going silent. A large-scale search was launched. Police officers, rescue teams, and dozens of concerned volunteers joined forces to comb through the dense woods. Word of the case spread quickly across Brazil, capturing the attention and the hearts of people everywhere. Even a local businessman joined the operation, using his private helicopter to scan the forest from above. Flyers with Lyanna and Felipe's photos were distributed throughout nearby towns as the desperate families clung to hope. It didn't take long for searchers to find the couple's campsite, but what they found there sent
Chills down their spines. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no footprints leading away. But something was clearly wrong. The tent had been slashed open from top to bottom. Bags were ripped apart, their contents scattered across the ground. 2 cell phones lay abandoned in the dirt. The scene told a story, one of fear and of lives suddenly interrupted. Soon after, the search team made a heartbreaking discovery. Deep in the woods, they found Felipe's body. He had been tied up and shot in the back of the head at point-blank range. It was a brutal execution, and it left rescuers fearing the worst for Lyanna. Still, Henry refused to give up hope. He turned to the media, ensuring the search dominated national headlines. A reward was offered for any information that could lead to Lyanna's rescue. But despite the massive effort, no leads came in. Meanwhile, Lyanna's nightmare was far from over. After killing Felipe, the kidnappers dragged her back to the same house where they'd kept her prisoner. But this time, things got even worse. 2 more men had joined the gang, Antonio Gutano Dilva and Agnaldo Perez. Their teenage leader, Champino, proudly told the others that Lyanna was now his property and that they could do whatever they wanted to her. It was an invitation to horror, and the others accepted it without hesitation. A day later, after hearing that a massive search operation was underway, the kidnappers began to panic. They decided to move their captive again, this time to the home of another gang member, Antonio Matias Daros. That evening, the group went out to a nearby river to fish,
bringing Lyanna with them. It was cold outside, and in a twisted attempt to appear kind, their ringleader draped his jacket over her shoulders. But that small act of fake compassion meant nothing compared to what came next. Later that night, Champino's older brother showed up, completely unaware of what his sibling had been involved in. When he saw Lyanna, he instantly recognized her. Her face was everywhere on the news, the missing girl half the country was searching for. Pulling his brother aside, he warned him, "The police are on to you. They're looking for her everywhere." Those words sealed Lyanna's fate. Realizing the search was closing in, Chino decided to get rid of the only witness who could expose him. He told Lyanna she was free, that he would lead her back to the road where she could find help. But it was a lie. Instead, he led her deep into the woods, far from the lights, the roads, and any hope of rescue. And there, in that silent darkness, he murdered her. First, stabbing her repeatedly with a knife, then crushing her skull with a rock to make sure she was dead. 5 days later, searchers found her body. The scene was horrific. She had been brutally mutilated almost beyond recognition. But one thing stood out. She was still wearing the killer's jacket. That detail would later become a crucial piece of evidence. For all their cruelty, the gang members were unbelievably careless. They didn't flee, they didn't hide the evidence, they didn't even destroy the murder weapon. Champino had left his jacket, soaked with sweat and DNA, draped over Lyanna's body. He even brought the knife home, washed it, and buried it in his own backyard.
Then he tried to scrub the blood out of his clothes so he could keep wearing them as if nothing had happened. That arrogance, that shocking stupidity, would be exactly what led police straight to them. Through DNA analysis, investigators were finally able to identify every member of the gang responsible for the horrific assault on Lyanna. One by one, the suspects were tracked down and arrested, almost all at the same time. When questioned, their leader didn't even try to deny it. In fact, he bragged about what he'd done. With disturbing pride, he described how he had kidnapped, assaulted,
and ultimately murdered Lyanna, recounting every detail of her final days as if it were some kind of twisted achievement. After a long and highly publicized trial, nearly all of the adult members of the gang received severe sentences. Paulo Cesar Dilva Marquez, known as Perbuku, was given life in prison for the murder of Felipe. Antonio da Silva and Agnaldo Perez also received life sentences for their roles in the crime. But Antonio Matias Daros, the man who had provided his house as a hideout, received only 6 years. He hadn't personally participated in the torture, but his home had become the stage for unthinkable violence. And then there was the ringleader, the youngest and the most brutal of them all. At the time of the murders, he was just 16 years old. Because of that, the court couldn't sentence him as an adult. Instead, he was sent to a juvenile detention facility, a placement for rehabilitation, not punishment. Even there, he proved impossible to control. He attempted to escape several times, lashed out violently at guards, and showed no signs of remorse. A psychiatric evaluation later revealed multiple mental disorders. None of them individually explained his behavior, but together, they painted a chilling picture. A sadistic young man completely devoid of empathy or regret. A teenager who, despite his age, had already become a monster. After that psychological evaluation, the ringleader was transferred to a secure psychiatric facility where he was ordered to undergo
mandatory treatment and rehabilitation. Despite multiple appeals from the families of Lyanna and Felipe, no further punishment was ever imposed. The killer, who had shown no remorse for his crimes, ended up in far better conditions than he had ever lived in before. Inside the facility, he was given his own private, comfortable room, complete with a large TV, internet access, and even an orthopedic bed. He receives 4 customized meals a day designed to meet his nutritional needs. Incredibly, the cost of maintaining him there is estimated at around 11,200 Brazilian reals per month, roughly $2,500, all funded by the state. In recent years, he's repeatedly petitioned for release, claiming that he's completed his treatment and no longer poses a threat to society, meaning he believes he deserves to walk free again. It's a bitter reality that still haunts the families of Lyanna Friedenbach and Felipe Cafe, parents who lost everything yet continue to watch the person responsible live in comfort. If you found this case compelling, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more true crime stories. We post new cases every night. Until next time, stay sharp and stay vigilant.
If you found this case compelling, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more true crime stories. We post new cases every night.